The desert sun blazed down on the endless highway as a gang of masked men surrounded a lone trucker's rig. They thought it was just another easy score: steal the truck, sell the cargo, and disappear. But the man they were robbing wasn't just any trucker. He was a former soldier. And the moment they put a gun in his face, they sealed their fate. They thought they could take his truck and walk away, but they had no idea who they were messing with. What would you do in his shoes? Let us know in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more incredible stories. The sun hung low over the desert highway, casting long shadows across the cracked asphalt. Dust swirled lazily in the dry air as a massive 18-wheeler rumbled along the empty road. Behind the wheel, Logan Hayes adjusted his grip, his calloused hands steady on the wheel. He had been on the road for more years than he cared to count, hauling freight across the country, but something about today felt off. The diner up ahead was a familiar stop on of those places only truckers knew, where the coffee was strong, and the food was just decent enough to keep you going. Logan pulled in, letting the engine settle with a deep, guttural growl. He parked the rig, stepping out and stretching his back with a satisfied grunt. As he walked toward the diner, he noticed them. 3 men loitered near the gas pumps, pretending to chat, but their eyes were locked on his rig. They weren't truckers. Their clothes were too clean, their boots barely scuffed. They had the look of men who didn't belong out here, and Logan knew the type: drifters, thieves, or worse. He made a mental note and kept walking. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of frying bacon and stale coffee. A few regulars sat at the counter, but Logan could feel the weight of a stare on his back. He casually glanced at the reflection in the window. One of the men from outside had followed him in, taking a seat by the entrance. Logan took a slow sip of his coffee, his mind working. This wasn't random. These guys weren't just passing through. The man near the door caught his eye and smirked. "Nice rig you got out there," he said, his voice smooth but carrying a sharp edge. Logan didn't look up. "Appreciate it." "Looks expensive," the man continued. "Must be a pain keeping it safe out on these roads." Logan set his cup down, turning slightly to get a better look at him. The guy was wiry, his leather jacket zipped up despite the heat. A bulge near his waist told Logan everything he needed to know he was carrying. "I get by," Logan said, his voice even. The man chuckled, shaking his head. "See, me and my boys, we're in the business of keeping things safe, for a price, of course." Logan finally met his eyes, holding his gaze just long enough to make the guy shift slightly in his seat. "That's so?" The man nodded. "Out here, trucks go missing all the time. Cargo disappears. Drivers end up lost." He leaned forward, lowering his voice. "Wouldn't want that happening to you, now would we?" Logan let a beat pass before he spoke. "I've been doing this a long time," he said calmly. "Seen all kinds of guys try all kinds of tricks." He picked up his coffee and took another slow sip. "But let me give you a little advice. If you're planning on taking my truck, you better be damn sure you can handle what comes next." The man's smirk faltered just for a second, but Logan caught it. Outside, his rig sat waiting, but something told him that by the time the night was over, this wouldn't just be about a truck. The moment Logan stepped out of the diner, he knew things had escalated. His gut had been right. This wasn't just some half-baked intimidation attempt. These men weren't just looking to scare him. They wanted his truck, and they weren't planning on asking twice. The 3 men who had been hanging around earlier were now closer to his rig, their postures more aggressive. The wiry man from inside, clearly their leader, leaned against the cab door, a smug grin spreading across his face. "Thought about our little offer?" he asked, tapping a cigarette against his palm. His 2 goons flanked the truck, one near the driver's side, the other circling toward the back. Logan kept his face neutral, but his pulse had quickened. These guys were getting sloppy, too eager, too confident. "Like I said," Logan replied, taking slow, deliberate steps toward his rig. "You're making a mistake." The leader chuckled, shaking his head. "See, that's where you're wrong, old man." He nodded to his crew. "We're giving you a choice. Either hand over the keys, walk away, and keep your teeth, or we take it all, and you don't walk away at all." The man closest to Logan cracked his knuckles, a thick-necked brute who clearly enjoyed playing the enforcer. Logan noted the bulge under his jacket, another gun. The guy on the other side had slipped something out of his pocket, a knife, small but sharp, glinting in the late afternoon sun. Logan let out a slow breath. This was getting out of control fast. He could talk his way out of a lot of things, but this wasn't one of them. The leader must have seen something in Logan's expression because his grin twisted into something darker. "Oh, I get it," he sneered. "You think you're some kind of tough guy? Maybe you used to be. But times change, old-timer, and right now, you're outnumbered." The thug with the knife took a step closer, tapping the blade against his thigh. "Last chance, cowboy." Logan glanced at his truck, at the road behind them. Nowhere to go. He clenched his fists. If they wanted his truck, they were going to have to take it the hard way. Logan exhaled slowly, rolling his shoulders like a man shaking off a long day. He had given them a chance. More than one. But they weren't walking away. The leader smirked, mistaking Logan's silence for fear. He reached into his jacket, flashing the grip of a pistol. "We don't have all day, old man. Hand over the keys." Before he could finish, Logan moved. His right hand shot forward, slamming into the wrist of the man with the knife. The blade clattered to the ground as the thug yelped in pain, cradling his arm. Without missing a beat, Logan pivoted and drove his elbow into the thick-necked brute's jaw, sending him stumbling backward. The leader barely had time to process what had just happened before Logan turned on him. In one swift motion, Logan grabbed the man's wrist and twisted hard. The pistol fell, bouncing off the asphalt. The leader gasped, his smirk wiped clean off his face. Logan stepped forward, his grip tightening. "You boys really don't know when to quit, do you?" His voice was steady, but there was an edge to it now, quiet, dangerous certainty. The leader struggled, trying to pull free, but Logan wasn't letting go. The other two thugs hesitated, their confidence suddenly shaken. Logan had moved too fast, too efficiently. This wasn't some old trucker past his prime. This was a man who had seen real fights. And from the way he stood, from the cold certainty in his eyes, it was clear he had won every single one. The leader gasped, his wrist still twisted in Logan's grip, his knees buckling from the pain. His earlier cocky smirk had vanished, replaced by the desperate realization that he had just made the worst mistake of his life. Logan wasn't just some trucker. He was a man who had seen war, who had faced real threats, and who had left men twice as mean as these fools broken in the dirt. The other two thugs hesitated, their eyes darting between their fallen leader and the trucker who had just dismantled them in seconds. One of them reached for his gun. Bad move. Logan let go of the leader's wrist and, in the same motion, snatched the pistol from the ground. Before the thug could even unholster his weapon, Logan had the gun aimed dead center at his chest. "Don't," Logan said, his voice calm, controlled like a man who had done this before. The thug froze, his fingers barely grazing his holster. Sweat dripped down his forehead as he slowly raised his hands, stepping back. The leader tried to save face, tried to reclaim some of his lost dominance. "You think you're tough, old man?" he spat. "You don't know who you're messing with." Logan chuckled. "No, son, you don't know who you messed with." With one swift motion, he slammed the pistol's handle into the leader's gut. The man doubled over, gasping for breath. But Logan wasn't done. He grabbed the thug by the collar and dragged him toward the truck stop parking lot. His crew watched in horror, too afraid to intervene. "Let's go for a walk," Logan said, his grip unrelenting. He marched the leader toward the entrance of the diner, where a dozen truckers had gathered, drawn by the commotion. They had seen plenty of punks try to shake down the wrong guy before. But this was something special. Logan tossed the leader forward. He stumbled, landing hard on his hands and knees in front of the crowd. "Meet the guy who thought he could hijack my rig," Logan announced to the onlookers. Laughter rippled through the crowd. A grizzled trucker in a cowboy hat smirked. "Looks like he ain't much of a hijacker now, is he?" Another trucker stepped forward, arms crossed. "Bet you boys thought you had an easy score. Instead, you got your asses handed to you by one man." The leader's face burned red as he tried to push himself up, but Logan placed a boot on his shoulder, keeping him down. "You want to take another shot?" Logan asked, his voice low, dangerous. The leader shook his head, his pride shattered. Logan finally stepped back, tossing the stolen pistol toward the man's feet. "Take your toys and get out of here. And if I ever see you near a truck stop again, you won't be walking away next time." The leader scrambled to his feet, his thugs following suit. They didn't dare say a word. They just ran humiliated, defeated, and utterly broken. The truckers roared with laughter as they disappeared into the night. Logan holstered his own weapon and walked back to his rig, nodding to the onlookers. "Drinks on me," one of the truckers called out. Logan smirked. "I'll take a black coffee." He climbed into his rig, turned the ignition, and let the deep rumble of the engine drown out the last echoes of the thugs' failure. They had picked the wrong truck. And now, the whole town knew it. Logan sat in his truck, hands steady on the wheel, the scent of diesel and dust filling the cab. The adrenaline had faded, but his mind was still sharp, replaying the events of the night. He'd been through plenty in his life wars, fights, the kind of trouble that turns boys into men, but tonight wasn't about him. It was about a lesson, the kind of lesson that fools like those hijackers never saw coming. The truck stop behind him was alive with murmurs, truckers swapping stories over coffee, still laughing about the punks who thought they could steal a rig from the wrong man. Logan had seen it all before, men who mistook kindness for weakness, who thought an old trucker was just another easy target. But the road has a way of humbling men like that. Logan glanced at his rearview mirror, watching the taillights of the hijacker's car vanish down the highway. He knew their type. They'd lay low for a while, licking their wounds, making excuses for why they lost. But deep down, they'd never forget this night. And neither would the other truckers. This wasn't just about one fight. It was about respect. Truckers weren't just drivers. They were the lifeblood of the road, the backbone of every town, every city. They looked out for each other because no one else would. And tonight? Tonight proved that no matter how tough the world got, no matter how many punks thought they could take what wasn't theirs, there were still men like Loganman who stood their ground. A knock on his door broke his thoughts. It was an older trucker, a man named Earl, who'd been sitting in the diner when everything went down. He leaned against the doorframe, a knowing smirk on his face. "That was some show, Logan." Logan chuckled. "Wasn't looking for one." Earl nodded, pulling out a cigarette, lighting it with the slow patience of a man who'd been on the road longer than most had been alive. "Ain't about looking for trouble. It's about knowing how to handle it when it comes knocking." Logan exhaled, looking out at the open road ahead. "Yeah, guess it is." Earl took a drag, letting the smoke curl into the night air. "A lot of young guys out here think they gotta prove something. Think toughness is about talking big and throwing the first punch. But real toughness?" He tapped the side of Logan's truck. "It's about knowing when to stand tall and when to let a man walk away with his pride barely intact." Logan nodded. He knew the truth of that better than most. "You think those boys learned their lesson?" Earl asked. Logan smirked. "Oh, they'll be telling this story for the rest of their miserable lives, just not the way they wanted to." Earl chuckled, pushing off the truck. "Good. The road's got enough trouble without idiots thinking they run it." He tipped his hat. "You take care out there, Logan." Logan gave him a nod as he started up the rig. The familiar rumble beneath him was more than just an engine, it was home. He had miles to go, places to be, but one thing was certain. The next time some fool thought they could take from a trucker, they'd remember this night. And they'd think twice. Now let me ask you, have you ever been underestimated? Have you ever had to remind someone that they picked the wrong fight? Tell us your story in the comments. And don't forget, like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more real stories from the road.